When I started this project, I had no intention of shooting video or putting together some kind of a how-to tutorial about what I did, and that's largely due to the fact that I didn't know what I was doing. Math and science are not strong suits in my life, so I had to come up with a solution that worked for me. But essentially, what I did is I took my Harman Titan 4x5 pinhole camera and I added a Schneider-Kreuznach Super-Angulon 90 millimeter f8 lens to it, which really expanded the capabilities of this fantastic camera. But for my own use, I did shoot a couple of still pictures just to kind of do a photo journal of what I did do. And what you see there are some stakes pounded into the ground about 10 feet apart with my 4x5 Calumet camera all the way there in the background. Now here is another view from behind the camera, and you can see the wooden stakes in the ground. There's 10, 20, 30 feet, and then up into infinity in the cemetery across the street from our home. And here's a close-up shot of this wonderful lens that I decided to use on this project. And I've got it set up in my recessed lens board. And once I got everything focused from 10 feet out to infinity, an acceptable focus, I locked everything down, and the front standard, the rear standard, and then carried everything back inside and then removed the lens from the lens board and then measured from the forward face of the ground glass to the forward face of the lens board. And I recorded that dimension. Here I'm using a set of calipers to simulate what it is that I did. I made this measurement on the Cambo and then wrote it down. And here I'm just trying to illustrate what I did. Once downstairs in my workshop, I was able to set up a situation, I guess, where I could transfer the measurement I recorded to the actual cone of the Harman Titan pinhole camera. And I'm using a 150 millimeter cone. And so I just so happened to have a scrap piece of plywood with white formica on it, and I drew a couple of lines, one that represented where the ground glass was, and then measured on the scrap piece of plywood the distance from the ground glass to where I needed to cut the cone. And I set up a laser that shot a line across that piece of plywood, but ultimately across that cone as well. On the back side of the camera, you can see a big chunk of plastic that's been clamped to the camera back. And what that was to use it as a way to keep the camera square. So it held it square, the plywood I leveled up, and so everything was kind of copacetic to making this cut, which was pretty gosh darn nervous to me. Yeah, with the lights turned out, you can better see what I was trying to describe in the previous clip. You can see that laser shooting a line right across that plywood and also right across the cone, which I carefully marked with a pencil. And that was going to be my cut line of where I needed to cut the cone. I should mention here that something else that I did is I knew I needed a lens board. I actually made the lens board before cutting the cone. I had to add in the thickness of the lens board, at least the area of the lens board that stuck out in front of the lens cone. So in a sense that extended the distance of the lens cone, which was 1/8 of an inch. Well, no turning back now. I'm committed here, right? So I used a fine tooth, kind of a hacksaw blade, so I knew it wouldn't tear the plastic too much. And I cut the end of the cone off. And I had my fingers crossed because, again, it was kind of nerve-wracking to do this. I had never done this work before, so I was scared. Once the cone was cut to length, I used a sanding block with some 80 grit sandpaper on it and kind of tuned up that cut surface to make it nice and smooth and remove any irregularities out of it. And here's a shot of that lens board I made. It's out of a phenolic type plastic material. Again, it's just scrap I had hanging around. And again, I've pressed my old shopsmith into use yet again on another project. I bought this machine brand new 40 years ago, and it's done an amazing amount of projects for me. Great little piece of machinery. All right, once I got the lens board made up and the lens attached to it, I headed back outside and set up the camera in a situation where it would I could test it. That's essentially what I'm doing here. Is I set up a tape measure on the ground and pointed the camera at a shipping container I owned that had some printing on the side of it, and I checked out through the ground glass what the image looked like. Could I read the lettering? And I was absolutely tickled that everything was just sharp. It was just gosh darn sharp. And here in this shot here is the typical view that a large format photographer sees. They see their world totally upside down. Once I was happy with how everything was working, I broke down the setup and took the camera back downstairs to my workshop and broke apart the lens board from the lens cone, and all I had on hand for an adhesive was this marine sealant, silicone sealant, and I knew, from 39 years of working in the boat building industry as a yacht carpenter, I knew I could make this work. So that's what I did. I just gooed up everything and stuck the lens board to the lens cone and put a lead weight on top of it to clamp it together, and I let it set overnight to cure. And the next day, I gave everything a light sanding, getting rid of some of the excess silicone and just smoothing things up. And then I vacuumed off all of the dust and all of the debris from it, getting ready to give it a few coats of paint. In the end, I ended up, I used a kind of an epoxy paint, I guess it is. And again, it's what I had hanging around. And I ended up giving it 3 coats of paint. Once the paint had dried, I brought everything back upstairs and I began to mount the lens to the new lens cone. This part here, using the wrench, I was even scary of doing that because I was fearful I would slip with a wrench and poke a hole in the back element of the lens. But thankfully that didn't happen, and I was able to get everything firmly fit and snug, and I was in business. Before I cut away to actual images, photos that I shot, I wanted to share a few of the ideas I am now working on, which is attaching a 6x7 rollback to a 4x5 film holder and using the film holder as an adapter to fit in the back of the Titan camera. Just cut out the center there, and then I'll screw the rollback to that. I also have several 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 film holders that I'm contemplating attaching to a film holder. Extra lenses too. And so, yeah, after the success of this project, my mind has been kind of reeling with new ideas. All right, so now let's take a look at some of the photos. This first shot is of the Soamesville Selectmen's Bridge, and it's located in the center of Soamesville on Mount Desert Island, Maine. And I kid you not, there's probably been about 1 million photographs or more of this iconic setting. And it is a beautiful, very picturesque setting. We had just had some snow, a little light dusting of snow the day before, and that kind of added an interesting element, I think, to it. But anyway, the settings on my camera were I'm using Ilford FP4 125 and have an aperture opening of f22 and a half-second shutter speed, and I'm using a orange filter. Directly across the street from the Selectman Bridge is the iconic Soamesville Public Library, nestled up against the mill pond there. Anyway, yes, millions of photos have been taken of this place too. It's a beautiful little library overlooking Somes Sound, the harbor off of Somes Sound. And again, the camera settings, I was at f22, 1/8 of a second with the using an orange filter. This next shot is also another popular scene for people to photograph, and you access it from the other side of the library. It's behind the library, and you're overlooking mill dam the mill dam there, the outflow from the mill pond. I've actually, at low tide, I've climbed down in there and I've shot some nice photographs right back against the waterfall. But again, it's a beautiful setting, and the lighting was just awesome that day that I was out there. And f22 again, 1/8 of a second, and an orange filter. All right, now I've changed geographical locations, and instead of being on the center of Mount Desert Island, I moved to the southern tip. I'm in the small town of Bass Harbor. I actually used to live here for several years, and what we're looking at is Western Mountain as seen from Rich's Lobster Pier. My camera settings were f22 again. All of the images are f22, 1/8 of a second, and an orange filter. Used to love to come down here to this wharf, and my kids would fish for mackerel off of it, so it brought back some nice memories for me. I shot this next image just because I was curious as to how much I could get in focus from foreground to background. So yeah, I'm still at Rich's Lobster Pound or Lobster Pier, and those railings, the end of the railings there are maybe 10 feet away. Maybe even closer than that. But yeah, they're a little bit blurry there, or they are blurry. But as you travel on down that ramp and out towards the water, things really come into focus. So I can't complain. I'm pretty pleased with this fixed focus, kind of point and shoot 4x5 film camera. All right, here is the last shot from, again, in Bass Harbor, at Little Island Marine. I wanted to see if the camera was focused in enough to be able to pick up, or you could read the names of the boats printed on their bows legibly. Here, as we all know, software compresses images, particularly when you export them from their native format, and this doesn't look as sharp as what I can see on my computer. But here again, I'm just really pleased how this project turned out. f22, 1/8 of a second, and an orange filter. So, as I mentioned earlier in this video, I am going to be attaching a 6x7 rollback to a 4x5 film holder, using the film holder as an adapter of sorts, so I don't have to change anything with the Harman Titan original film back. And then I have a bunch of 2¼ by 3¼ film that I'd like to try to adapt the film holder to a 4x5 film holder, and I've got some ideas on how to do that. I'd also like to get another lens, so it really expands the use of the Harman Titan pinhole camera, 4x5 pinhole camera, to do a whole bunch of things. And gosh, the thing is nearly indestructible because of the materials that it's built out of. So that's it for this video. Hopefully somebody has gotten something out of this, inspired them to try something new. This was all new to me, even doing this video and doing a voiceover. Never done a voiceover before, but I just felt it was worthwhile to provide this information. Anyway, that's it from here.